Hi, Geoff.
Hi, Paul. So, what are we here to talk about today?
We're here to talk about your fear pyramid.
What a coincidence.
So, for people who are watching who have no idea, can you just put that into context? What is the fear pyramid?
Yeah, the fear pyramid is I was going to say that it was a concept I developed, but that would be disingenuous. It was, I was just talking to our expert camera person, Gabriela, earlier on about the fact that the fear pyramid came to me as a grace. I was I've always said, I developed this concept. It came to me when I was depressed, but it actually came to me as an act of grace. I suffered with depression for probably from about the age of 12. I wouldn't have diagnosed it as that, or wouldn't have understood it as that, but I was a depressed kid. When I left the junior school, I went to the big school. It was like I was like in this ocean of otherness, and I was completely disorientated and fearful and anxious all the time. So it was this kind of depression carried on right through into my early married life and in my first marriage. And I used to get these debilitating depressions that would come into my life and literally take over. They were like vagabonds. They would come into my house, they would kick down the door, they would take over everything. They were in my food, they were in my relationship, they were in my voice. You could hear it. You could hear the dullness in my voice when I spoke. I was afraid to live. I was like Mesna, the great mountaineer, when he was trying to climb Nanga Parbat solo. There was one point where he said, I was too afraid to go up, I was too afraid to go down, I was too afraid to stay where I was. At that point in time, he said, I was crying for my wife because I wasn't ready to be away from her. He said, I was afraid to live. I just remember finding this moment where I just thought, I've had enough of this. I'm not having this. I'm not going to live like this anymore. And the moment I found that piece of courage, I found courage from somewhere, this idea came to me. Now, I thought I just had an idea. And this is what I was explaining to Gabriela, after unpacking that for 30 years, I've realised it was an act of grace. It was a gift from God. So this fear pyramid came into my mind. It just said, write everything down that you're afraid of. Draw a pyramid and write the least fear at the bottom and the worst fear at the top, and then systematically confront everything you're afraid of until there's nothing left. And that was an act of grace. I'm saying it now because I used to think I developed it, but I didn't. It was a gift. But one of my vows to God was that I don't know what the answer to this is. I don't know. I'm depressed. I can't get out of it. No one can help me. Not even the professionals can help me. Doctors didn't have a Scooby-Doo. I had no idea what to do with me. And I remember saying to myself, when I find the answers to this fear, this depression, I'm going to tell everybody, because nobody was telling me. If they knew, they weren't telling me. Mostly, I don't think they did know. So I wrote down this pyramid, and I started to confront all of the things I was afraid of, one by one, systematically, to get desensitization to the fear.
It's important to say, because I know that we talk a lot about this, is about acclimatization. So you're not just suddenly at the top of your fear or the middle. You start off at the very bottom, you acclimatize, move on. And you do a lot of parallels with mountain climbing as well, where you can't just be suddenly in the middle of the mountain because your lungs won't take the air, the oxygen, it'll be too much. So what was the first step on that pyramid?
So the first step was the idea was a grace. It was gifted to me. That's definite. So the idea came to me fully formed. Then it was my job to sit and do it. But I had hope. The moment I saw this idea and I thought, I know what, I'm afraid of lots of things, and that's debilitating me. If I'm able to stand in front of these things and overcome them, then I won't be debilitated anymore. I'll be able to live the life I want to live. I'll stop being afraid of my own body chemistry. I'll stop being afraid of my own potential. So the first fear was the fear of admitting that I was afraid. So rather than say, which I did before, because I was I think I was the second dan in karate by then, so that made it even worse, because I shouldn't be afraid. I kept thinking, why are you so afraid? You shouldn't be afraid. You're a black belt. I felt embarrassed. I felt emasculated.
That must bring so many more emotions other than fear as well.
Yeah, I felt like a coward. I felt like people were judging me, because they were going, "This, I'm just watching him bottling it. He's afraid of the tide in the bath. This guy, he couldn't fight the tide in the bath. And he's supposed to be a black belt."
Did you think that black belt would eradicate fear?
Yeah, I mean, I had one of my biggest depressions straight after winning my black belt, because I suddenly realised that isn't it. I mean, I've done a lot of things to get there. I've overcome a lot of things to get there, but I still didn't understand fear.
And the people you were surrounded with, your instructors, you probably thought they had no fear.
I thought none of them had any fear. I thought they were all fearless. And as I expanded, I was able to look at them and I could see through them all like an X-ray. I could see all of the things. I could see all of the lies they lived. I could see all of the fears. I could see all of the incongruences. And it wasn't a judgment again. It was just looking and going, it's just obvious to me. So I thought that I was the only one that was afraid. What was revealed to me is that everybody's afraid. Some of us just hide it better than others. Some people at an advanced level learn to channel it. And at a higher level still, they no longer deal with fear. It's no longer about hardiness. It's no longer about desensitization. It's just about observing fear as an energy.
Because you've been obviously around a lot of fighters and a lot of tough men, and you've said in the books as well that they all feel fear.
Yeah.
Every one of them.
Everyone,
Some hide it.
Yeah, some of them. I've worked with one guy who could have a fight, really could have a fight. You watch him take 5 guys out. I remember him walking through town once, and 3 guys were coming towards him who he'd had a ruckus with in the nightclub the night before. He put his daughter into a shop, asked the shop girl to take care of her for 5 minutes, and he went out and dealt with these 3 people just like that, easy. But when his wife asked him to get a mortgage, he had a nervous breakdown, lost his marriage, lost custody of his child because he was afraid of... He didn't understand what the mortgage meant. He didn't understand. He just suddenly became terrified of it. I had one friend who committed suicide just because he moved out of an area he lived in, a lower working class area, which was his, that was his conditioning. He moved into a kind of a middle class area and he just couldn't cope with it. He just couldn't cope with it. He committed suicide. He didn't understand it. He hadn't expanded his awareness enough to understand that, this guy could stand and wrestle with world class people. But he didn't understand when it came to finance, to money, or a lot of people don't understand relationships. Or it's just exactly the same feelings, just from a different angle, just the same monster with a different hat on. So we have to learn to stand in front of it, absorb it. So I was placed before my fears, one at a time. I looked at the placeholder fears, the mundane fears, like a fear of spiders.
And that was at the bottom?
That was the very bottom of my pyramid, yeah. So that's how I did it. I built my courage up, I built my technique up, I built my understanding up by confronting the mundane fears.
How long did that take?
Well, with the spider, it sounds silly. And it also, confronting a spider and standing on a nightclub door, they might seem very disparate, but they're only separated by degree. They're no different. It's the same feelings. If I had a spider in the corner of my room, I wouldn't be able to go to sleep at night because it'd be on my mind. I couldn't control my internal dialogue. I'd be thinking that spider's going to fall on me in the night. So the first thing I did was found a spider. I just found it and picked it up, or I just prodded it out first with something, with a stick, and got used to it and watched it. Realised I could tread on it any time I've wanted to. It had no power really. Then I touched it and wriggled and ran off, and then eventually I would just pick it up and put it in my hand and let it run up my arm. So eventually I could pick a spider up and put it down without any fear at all. It no longer dominated my life. Some fears, Paul, disappeared the moment I writ them down. They were like, "Oh, he's onto us," and they went.
Okay, what?
Yeah.
Can you remember?
I'm just trying to think of any, because eventually, obviously, because as you start to confront the fears, lots of other things come in, and they go, "Oh, he's processing, he's practicing individuation, he's bringing up stuff from the unconscious." So there was lots of things queuing up to be processed, and lots of things running away. So some things just disappeared. I can't think of an example, but some things just disappeared by writing them down. Other things I had to confront several times. Some of the things, like, if you go into a karate tournament, I have no fear of that. But if I went into a karate tournament today, I'd have adrenaline, I'd have a build-up, but I just wouldn't connect to it. I wouldn't identify with it. So that process would still happen biologically. Although eventually, when I was working on the door, I couldn't get any adrenaline at all in sparring because I was so used to a much higher level. On the door, people are trying to kill you. It's very, very real, especially in a place like Coventry. It was a very violent city at the time. So sparring was so easy for me because I'd worked the doors. But there were levels on the door. Mostly you're working with, the normal run-of-the-mill guys, local fighters, people kicking off, drunk people. So I could break out of a conversation, go and, strangle somebody, take them out of a fight, strangle them and throw them out and come back without breaking the conversation. But there were other times people turned up who were gangsters, who were murderers, who were drug dealers, and then there was another level of threat. People that were prepared, not just isn't just about a fight. This becomes like if you enter into their realm, that's it. You're going to have house visits. You're going to have constant threat. You're never going to be safe. I know I know when I'm facing this particular person tonight who's coming up, he's a bit out of shape, but he's a ferocious fighter. He probably will only last 30 seconds, and I think I can beat him because I'm sober and I'm fit and I'm first. I think I can do that. But I know if I fight him tonight, and I'm going to fight him because I have to, I know I've got him for the rest of my life, literally. I've bumped into people 30 years after I fought with them, and to them it was yesterday.
But that's a legitimate fear to have, as in...
It's a legitimate fear, Paul, but what I'm saying is you don't just enter into a fight and beat somebody. You take on an enemy for life.
Yeah. And I mean, some of those fears, you're right to listen to them.
Yeah, of course,
Because as you said as well, you were there for 9 years and there was a certain burnout as well. So
yeah, it's wise to, I'm an eighth Dan. I'm probably, when I was at the height of my physical fighting prowess, I did not walk down dark alleys at night, and I did not cross fields for a shortcut. I didn't make it easy for people. I recognised my vulnerability more as an eighth Dan than I did as a first Dan, and I made myself a hard target. I made it very difficult for me to be a victim of a situation because I understood my vulnerability. I'd watched legendary characters lose a fight, lose their job, lose their marriages, lose their life because they didn't deal with the confrontation.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's another thing that really appealed to people from your work was that you're not understanding fear doesn't make you invincible.
No,
it just makes you a bit more intelligent with how you process it. And
you just become more aware of it. You become aware of what fear is. You become aware of legitimate fears. You become aware that reality is a jungle. It's not about what's right and wrong. It's just about what is and isn't. If I put you into the jungle tomorrow, you would take appropriate precautions. You wouldn't go in and go, I don't give a fuck. I shouldn't. Why should I be aware? Those tigers and lions. They've got no right to do this. You wouldn't do that. The society is exactly the same. So we have to live according to the society that we're in. So we take precautions. I'm more aware of my environment now than I ever was. I'm also aware of people. I'm aware of energies outside of people. There are realms outside of the human realm. We've got this arrogant belief that we're top of the food chain. We are not. We're not the top of the food chain. There are energies that feed off us, just like we feed off other things. So I'm aware that there are invisible energies that work through people and work as people. And that's why I've been attacked by some of my closest friends, people that weren't aware of these energies, and these energies use them to attack me. And I've seen it happen with very good people. I'm very, very wary. I'm very wary, especially around people that really like me. I'm most vulnerable around people that really admire me, because they're the ones that can turn very quickly because this energy can get into them. So that's another story, but that energy's there. But awareness allows me to be careful of that. It enables me to take I don't rely on your atmosphere or the atmosphere of somebody else. Wherever I go, I take my own atmosphere. So the devil is in the atmosphere, and he's looking for stray souls. He's looking for people to climb in. So you just have to be aware of that and take your own atmosphere. In other words, you take your own aura with you. There's a lovely saying in the Zohar. It says the demons can't cross water. The Death Eaters, the demons or whatever, they can't enter water. They can't go near water. Water represents spirit. It also represents the ethereal body. The ethereal body is the second of the 5 sheaths that we have as humans. The first sheath is the gross food sheath in the physical body. The second sheath is the ethereal, which is the breath sheath, which is, I'm going to do some stuff later with some Qigong. That's a way of developing a breath sheath. So that's like you surround yourself literally by prana, by ki or chi, by energy. And demons or divided thoughts or negative energies can't cross that threshold. So part of our protection in the Buddha level is to develop an ethereal, not just the second sheath, because the ethereal, the breath or the air or the spirit, whatever you want to call it, penetrates all of the sheaths that protect the soul. So it penetrates all of them, so it permeates through them all. But the first one is like an armor. You've got the physical body, and you've got the ethereal sheath, which is like an armor which protects you. So you make sure that when you go out, that you're surrounded by that your life is about developing that sheath, so that you're not just protected, Paul, you're invisible. Al-Ghazali, the great Imam, said that if we allow that sheath to wither, or we don't keep on top of it, in other words, if we fall out of alignment, we will be seen. So these energies will rush towards us like water to a crack in a tile. It will just naturally find a way in. So that's we're talking about the earth much further. We're talking about deeper inner pyramids of development. But it starts with, what am I afraid of? That's the first thing. Let's be really honest. I used to say, I'm not afraid of it. I just don't want to do it. I'm not scared of that. I just don't want to do it. But actually, I was terrified of it. So the first fear was to admit that I was afraid. I was afraid to admit that I was afraid. So that was the first thing I overcame. I wrote down all the things I was afraid of. These were placeholders. So they were legitimate fears, but they were easily combated. As I started to confront these fears and remove them, I recognized below them, there were more subtle fears. I was afraid of my mum. I was afraid of being abandoned by my mum. Even as an adult, I was afraid of standing up to my mum. I had a tattoo on my arm, and I hid it for 5 years because I was scared of my mum seeing it. So I had to start to recognise, I am afraid of my mum. That's quite embarrassing, but I am afraid. And it's not a very kind thing to say about my mum, but I was. It's not my mum's fault, it's my fault. I hadn't left home. I was still dominated by my mum, but equally I was dominated by my first wife. Exactly the same. It's not her fault. She just filled a gap that was empty. When I started to see those fears, they went on the pyramid with all the other monsters.
And did you do this totally yourself, or were there other people that you shared this with, or was it completely?
No, I just did it myself. And then when I started to teach truth, and people
in your karate lesson.
Yeah, it's a bit embarrassing, Paul, and I hope it doesn't sound pretentious, but I'd stand in a room and start talking to somebody, and suddenly I'd have a crowd around me. People are listening. Then I'd be embarrassed and step away, thinking, who am I? I'm not anybody to listen to. So I recognised that people were drawn to truth because God's in truth. So I started to teach it in my karate class, and I, at one stage I had 100 people in a Tuesday night karate class, paying X amount a session. Just couldn't fit them in the room. I was drawing people. People were starting to come from other cities. Later on, when I was writing about the doors, people came from other countries. People came from across the world just to stand in that class.
We met because of truth.
Yeah.
So someone gave me the Pavement Arena.
Yeah.
And
the video, yeah.
Yeah, the video. He knew that I was doing martial arts at the time, and I had this whole system going on, and he said to me, it's not going to work. And I said,
that's a shock, isn't it?
But it should do. What do you mean it's not going to work? And he
you haven't seen it on the bag. Let me show you on the bag.
But he took me through some basic stuff, and the simplicity, like stripping everything away and giving it down to its core. After that one session, it probably was about an hour, he said, have a look at this video. It's called the Pavement Arena. And he studied a lot of what you did, and he just showed me the most basic stuff. But what was in that basic stuff was just immense.
Yeah.
And I said, I want what he has.
Yeah.
There is something there. And he
you
was
turned about my house, didn't you, Bab?
Yeah. Yeah.
Never got rid of you since. It's like 30 years ago.
Yeah. And then I was picking your brains at some points, and you just said, well, I think at that time we we wrestled or grappled.
We wrestled in my front room.
Yeah, I was very new to wrestling and grappling. I said, I don't think that would work, and you said, try it. Next thing I knew, I was on my back with some carpet buns. And I remember Sharon walking past, going,
I was always wrestling with someone in my front room. There's always someone being wrestled in my front room.
But that's what you were saying before. You have to feel it.
Yeah.
And then once I felt it, I thought that's truth. Like just being confident enough to say, let me just go into this and see what happens. And it's like a phrase you keep saying. It's like an acid bath. You know.
Yeah, it's an acid bath. It's the new word is hench, isn't it? Hench. This is hench martial arts. My writing is hench, raw. It's just what it is. It's just neat. There is nothing extraneous. There's nothing superfluous. There's nothing that doesn't have a function. You know, it's immediate and it works. And it's so simple, it's insulting. The best stuff is, our stuff was so simple, I started teaching it in a sports centre, in a tiny room in a sports centre in Coventry. And the truth was so powerful, it rippled out across the world. And suddenly me and Sharon were invited over to teach for Chuck Norris in Las Vegas, 500 of Chuck Norris's top black belts. And we went over there, and I went over there twice actually and taught for him, because he saw the truth in it. It actually didn't just go to Chuck Norris, it went to Australia first. And a guy called John Will, who's a legendary Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy, looked at it and said, this is truth. And he gave it to Richard Norton, who was a film star who acted with Chuck Norris. And so I became friends with John. I became friends with Richard Norton. And Richard Norton said, this is truth. And he gave it to Chuck Norris in America. And Chuck Norris looked at it and said, this is truth. And they invited me over to teach. And I was teaching this truth with the Machados, with Benny Akides, with some of the best grapplers and strikers in the world. And I was going over with my truth and just saying, this is it. And it was so, this truth was so natural that Higa Machado immediately befriended me, gave me a jiu-jitsu lesson there and then. He was just talking in one of the lobbies, and he gave me a lesson there and then. Benny Akides spent hours with me because he'd seen the truth. Benny Akides' wife is a shaman. She's the great-great-great-granddaughter of Geronimo. I've never met her. She hadn't heard of me from Adam. And she saw me and didn't know me and saw the truth. This is true. She made a beeline for me, and she never left me alone until she said what she needed to say. She sat at dinner with me, got the Machados here, Benny Akides here, got Benny Akides' wife sat next to me. She's got a hand on my neck for all of the dinner, talking to me, telling me why I was there, what was going on. She told me about the spirits around me. And I said, are they telling you that I'm in the right place? And she looked at them and she started laughing. And she said, you're in Las Vegas teaching for Chuck Norris. I think you're in the right place. Yeah. You know, you've been invited over here. So that was not about me, Paul. That's about the truth. The truth is separate from me. The truth, I access the truth, but to access the truth, I had to absorb 99% of the lie. You have to go and stand in front of it and say, okay, let's have a look at it. It's posturing. The lie is posturing, and it's big, and it's a three-dimensional monster. But if you stand in front of it, it becomes a two-dimensional cartoon. And if you absorb 99% of it, it dissipates. Ushiba, if you get a chance to look up Maria Ushiba, the founder of Aikido, he had to stand in front of a firing squad because he trained with Nusaburo Debuchi, who was a great Japanese prophet. He went off to learn the Budo through him, but he was quite a controversial character, this Nusaburo Debuchi, and they ended up in front of a firing squad. It's a longer story, but and they said Ushiba was shaking more than anybody else, but he absorbed 99% of it, and at the last minute the command was called off to kill them, and they were let go. And he was able to realize enlightenment by absorbing 99% of the lie. But he said you have to absorb it. So Ushiba was a bit like Gandhi in martial arts terms. You couldn't be in the room with him and it not affect you. You couldn't be in the room with him and it not change you. And that's not because of Ushiba, and it's not because of Gandhi. That's because of the truth that's permeating from them. But if you look at Gandhi, he was hench. He contracted himself until he was basically living off mostly prana, just off a little bit of food and mostly prana.
He confronted his fears, didn't he?
Absolutely permeated truth. Yeah, he confronted the fears. He did exactly the same thing.
Because all this, what you're saying as well, just to sort of go back to the pyramid, was everything, even you ending up in Las Vegas, it all started from the very beginning. All started
from the first step of the pyramid.
Yeah, from
it started with grace. So I want to be clear about that, because I don't want to claim ownership of this, and I don't want to say that I invented it, but it started with grace. So the pyramid was given to me as a grace.
And this is Geoff Thompson, Fear, the friend of exceptional people. Yeah,
it was just a real coincidence. I happened to have that by me at the time we were doing an interview about fear, Paul. It's just the serendipity is startling, isn't it?
Yeah, this is a great, I mean, this is people gravitated to you, I think, through this.
Well, what happened, Paul, is that I was teaching these concepts and I was getting bigger and bigger classes, and I started teaching what I'd learnt about the fear pyramid, and people loved it. So I thought, well, I should write this down and format it. And of course, in writing it down, I was able to understand it even more. If you look at the Notes from a Factory Floor, my latest book, I go very deeply into the fear pyramid and the inner fear pyramid in actual experiences, and talk about how I did that and how I overcame it, and how I unpacked this seed of grace. In Judaism, they would call it Chokmah, which is wisdom. So we're graced a seed of wisdom, and then we have to put it into Bina, which is like developmental, and then it eventually becomes a certainty, which is the art, which means, this wisdom unpacked and articulated becomes a certainty at some point. And when it becomes a certainty, it's gold. Like if I come to you now to wrestle and I grip, I have a certainty with the grip that came from 18 months of full-time judo, where I got my ears cauliflowered and I got my fingers bent in the wrong directions, and I got thrown on my arse more than I've ever been thrown on my arse. But I found a certainty there that will never, ever leave me.
It helps when I'm distracted.
I always distract you. But you're a good grappler, so I distract you before I always I always wait till you've got your hand in your pocket or something.
There was telling the story about when we grappled in a cafe. He waited for me to pay.
Getting some change out of your pocket, and I grabbed you and you went, oh, we're going to wrestle.
I didn't know whether to pay, wrestle.
It was like that.
Have my tea.
Because I knew you wanted to wrestle, and I thought, now's the time to wrestle. He's distracted. And then we had a little bit of a wrestle round in the middle of the shop. Ludwig was looking at us like that.
The old Inspector Clouseau, Kato.
Oh, it was so funny. I grew up with my son Lewis. He's a great grappler.
He's very good.
Really good core. I was grappling with him since he could walk, and I used to grapple with him everywhere. He's only a babby, And I remember once, we went shopping, and Sham was looking around some stuff, and I started wrestling with Lou. I just used to grab him anywhere, and we'd end up wrestling. And suddenly this security guard come running across, breathing heavy, trying to separate us. And I says, "What's wrong?" And he goes, "You're fighting in the store." I goes, "He's my son. And of course I realised Lewis was 6'2" then, and like a big lump. So it looked like two blokes. We were having a full-on wrestle, knocking over shelves. It's funny because Sharon goes, "You two, get in the car."
And when people don't understand wrestling and they see it, it looks like an actual fight.
Oh, it does, yeah. He was a great wrestler. He used to catch me in the end, though. He used to throw me and then never let me forget it. He was really good.
He tripped me up in Edinburgh.
Yeah, you had wrestling in Edinburgh when we were there. We were screening in Romans, weren't we?
The Pyramid Text, I think.
Pyramid Text,
was it right? Yeah, the Pyramid Text.
It was the Pyramid Text.
Yeah.
Anyway, I remember you were wrestling in the car park.